Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on what time of day you're watching this video. We are going to continue with Chapter 12, Section 2, Air, Light, and Noise Pollution Notes. And if you bear with me, I am going to share my screen with you so that we can get started. So we kind of looked at some of the causes of air pollution in the first section and some of the effects of air pollution. So now we're going to talk about some kind of twist on it. Whether you're very young or very old, or you have, like asthma or heart problems, a lot of people are usually affected by things that are in the air. It usually makes diseases worse as time goes on. And if you participated in the in-class assignment on research of the different diseases that are affected by air pollution, you know some of the causes and some of the things that make it worse. So instead, diseases like lung emphysema, which is also kind of like an asthma, you have things called COPD, very similar to emphysema, heart disease and lung cancer are usually cited as the cause of death for many individuals. However, it is preceded by some type of air pollution in some instances. The American Lung Association has basically paid Americans have paid $10 billion a year related to the costs with insurance and doctor's visits and hospital visits, all because of respiratory issues caused by air pollution. You can also be affected by air pollution inside your home. It's not just things that are outside. So for instance, how the products that are in your home are manufactured, the chemicals that are used into making many of those products can actually make you sick. We mentioned in the last chapter, one of my students looked into her mattress that she just bought, and it was labeled that it was treated with formaldehyde to preserve it. So things like carpets, building materials, and paints, and furniture can all be sources of pollutants inside the buildings, especially when they're new. And as we mentioned before, formaldehyde is one of those chemicals that is used to treat things like plywood and furniture and carpet. Some of the immediate effects that you might feel are things like eye irritation or scratchy throat, maybe some nausea, and it can lead to difficulty breathing in people who are super sensitive. So just a schematic of where you can find some of these things that can cause air pollution. So if you have an indoor garage, you can be affected by carbon monoxide. If you have anybody that smokes in the house, that's definitely something that can affect you. It contains more than 4,000 chemicals. Radon, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, can seep up from the ground. If you have paints or cleaners or any kind of paint thinners, that can also lead to air pollution. If you have any pets like cats or dogs, their dander has been known to cause problems. And then, if you have a fireplace in your house, that can also be an issue as well, because you can have chemicals and some of the dangerous toxic fumes leaking into your house from that. So radon, as I mentioned before that we were going to talk about it, it's a colorless, tasteless, odorless gas. It's also very radioactive. So in some instances, uranium, which is a radioactive element that occurs naturally in the Earth's crust, there's some areas where houses were actually built on uranium. And you may not know because they're in such small quantities. However, after time and when it decays, it produces this radon gas. Now, it's usually found underground. It can be in the water, it can be actually in the soil, and it can leach up or leak into your house via different pipes, different fittings, windows, into your shower, so on and so forth. Why is it a problem? Well, it can actually destroy the DNA in your cells that line your air passages, and then eventually can lead to cancer. We see this a lot with people who smoke. Radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States. That radon can actually stick to dust particles, and then when you breathe in the dust, it actually enters your lungs. So it can make you very, very sick and can kill you. Asbestos, not as common as it was years ago. It was actually used in a lot of building materials as for a component that allowed things to be stronger and more resistant to heat. It was used as an insulator and also something called a fire retardant. and it was found in a lot of building materials. But what they were finding was that when you breathe in this asbestos, it can actually cut and scar your lungs and cause something called asbestosis. And this is kind of what it looks like. It looks almost like an insulation, if you've ever seen what insulation looks like. And this is just another form of what asbestos looks like. As you can see, it's very fine. If you breathe it in, it can scar your lungs. So how things enter your body? Well, you obviously breathe it in, goes down your trachea, which is actually here. And I think they actually have this picture backwards. The esophagus is in the back, the trachea is in the front. And then eventually goes into your lungs. And as it goes down into your lungs, goes into little areas called alveoli, and that's where your gas exchange takes place. So if you scar these areas, you're not going to be able to take in carbon dioxide as efficiently and remove you can't take in oxygen rather, and you can't remove carbon dioxide as efficiently as unscarred lungs would. So eventually, people who suffer from these issues because of air pollution will eventually die. Sometimes it could be from heart failure, sometimes it could be from lung cancer. So many industries and many companies have spent billions of dollars to remove the asbestos from buildings, including schools, not just not just traditional buildings, but also from schools too. Something that you may not think about, noise pollution. Yes, there is something called noise pollution. So basically any unwanted sound is called noise pollution. Many of us don't really think about the things that we do that affect our hearing. If you experience ringing in your ears after you've either listened to music or been to a concert or been to something loud, you're partially damaging your hearing. And over time, you can have significant hearing loss. That means whatever you were listening to was just too loud to begin with. So in the last 30 years, hearing loss has doubled. It says about 12%, and this book is probably, and these PowerPoint notes are a little bit outdated. So I think that number is probably a lot higher at this point. The earbuds that you put in your ears actually damage your hearing more than if you wore those, like the Beats headphones, for instance. Those are actually safer for you. When you put those earbuds into your ears, you actually destroy them at a faster rate and do more damage than the ones like the Beats headphones. So people who are in their 30s are losing their hearing here in the United States. When you compare to other places where they don't use these products, they don't use the portable listening devices like the MP3 players and your iPods and what have you, they actually have better hearing at the age of 30 than most Americans do at the age of they have better hearing at the age of 80 than most Americans do at the age of 30. So you can kind of control some of those noise pollutions by using mufflers on vehicles and lawnmowers and by obviously insulation. In Europe, there's actually a law that any kind of MP3 player must produce no more than 100 decibels of noise. General conversation is about 60 decibels, and lawnmowers are around 90 decibels. So just to give you an idea, 100 decibels is still quite loud. According to the National Institute of Health, you shouldn't be listening to anything over 85 decibels for 8 hours or more. In the United States, however, there aren't any regulations in place on MP3 players. However, you should probably be listening to something that's less than 85, and you want to do it for less than 8 hours. You don't want to be listening to music for a significant period of time. Light pollution. Yes, there is such a thing as light pollution. How do we know? All you have to do is look up at the nighttime sky, and you can't really see a lot of the stars, and that's because there's so much unwanted light. And this is an excellent picture demonstrating that. So unlike air or water pollution, light pollution doesn't present a direct hazard to humans. However, it does negatively affect our environment. It can actually kind of affect you on a regular basis because your brain is set to produce something called melatonin as the light starts to go down. And that's kind of your brain's cue into, okay, it's time to go to sleep. But if you're around a lot of bright lights around the time that you should be winding down to go to bed, your body doesn't produce the melatonin the way it should. And as a result, you don't get sleep as efficiently. And we've had this discussion before in class in which, number one, either A, you should not be watching TV on any kind of electronic devices at least 3 hours before bed, Or B, some of the devices now have settings on them that it can actually have like a nighttime glow on it, so it doesn't have those bright fluorescent lights. Because it can take your brain up to 3 hours for it to stop all those firings between the cells and communicating with each other. It can take up to 3 hours before your brain quiets down. Even though you may fall asleep right away, your brain is still active. So that's just one thing to think about. So energy gets wasted when the light gets directed upward into the night sky and is lost in space. And this is obviously a picture of the United States at nighttime. And the majority of the light is concentrated on the East Coast here. Some examples of light pollution: billboards. If you've ever driven by the school at night, you can see all the lights are lit up, or any kind of shopping center. They're very, very well lit. New York City, this is an excellent example. You have all of these marquees or all these signs that are lit up. It almost looks like daytime there, even though it's really nighttime. Las Vegas. When I was taking a trip across country to California, we looked down from our airplane and we saw a big bright light down on the ground, and that big bright light was actually Las Vegas. So we saw it from our airplane high above the sky. So some solutions to reducing light pollution: obviously shutting the lights off when you don't need them, but directing them downward instead of upward. Use time controllers so that you only use the light when it's needed. Using low pressure sodium sources is very efficient. When possible, these are just two of the solutions that you can use. So just to give you an idea, if we're looking at the night sky between the late 1950s to this is probably close to what we are now. Look at how dark the night sky used to be back in the 1950s versus what it is closer to today. All right, so quick little clip about light pollution. So if you give me 1 second, we will go there. Scientists thought Comet ISON. And I'm going to share that screen with you. Okay.
Close encounter with the sun was its last hurrah, but now there is evidence the comet may have survived. ISON came within 1 million miles of our sun on Thursday. Astronomers thought it had been incinerated, but at least part of the comet seems to still be intact. Welcome to CBS This Morning, Saturday. Some astronomers expected ISON to be the comet of the century due to its brightness, but expectations diminished over time. Sky gazers are facing a lot of diminished expectations lately. The problem is light pollution, the urban glow that obscures all but the moon and a few bright stars and planets. Bob Parks wants to do something about it. He's executive director of the International Dark Sky Association. Bob, good morning.
Good morning.
How big a problem is this?
Well, it's pretty big. What we associate as good, light has always historically been associated as good, but you can get too much of a good thing. What we're seeing is just since the advent of the electric light, we want more. So over a period of a century, we've just added much, much more light to the environment to the point where now it's a real problem. We spend $110 billion annually on wasted light. It produces 750 million tons of CO2. We just need to learn to use it more intelligently.
It seems like design is a big issue here.
It is. Poorly designed light fixtures that are putting more light in the sky than on the ground are just, they're something we can't afford anymore. We used to just use light indiscriminately. We have to learn to use it more intelligently.
Is there a way of measuring how fast we're essentially losing darkness in the country?
Yeah, unfortunately, we've done a lot of research on this. Up until the 50s, actually it started with Edison, with the invention of the electric light, about the turn of the century. But for the last century, we've accelerated. It didn't become noticeable until the 50s. During the 1950s, 50s, astronomers and folks started realizing that they could not see the night sky as well. Our organization was founded in '82. By that point, it was clear there was a problem, and it's growing about 3 to 5% every year.
I think people might hear the term light pollution and think, oh, that's a shame you can't see the stars well. But in your research, you have found that this affects our sort of evolutionary rhythms. This affects animals. This affects how we sleep, which are important things.
Exactly. I mean, we were the canary in the coal mines, the astronomers, the amateur astronomers. We saw it first. But the research is showing that it affects every species, and it affects species in a very dramatic way. Circadian disruption, which is something we've grown up with circadian rhythms for millennia. We have basically 12 hours a day, 12 hours of night. If we get 12 hours of night and 12 hours a day, our body is regulated well. When we start changing that, we start changing our health. And it doesn't just affect us, it affects every species from plants up to humans. But the impact is pretty dramatic. If we don't get enough dark, we don't produce something called melatonin, and melatonin can be an inhibitor of all kinds of disease. It's part of the immune system. And we're just now finding that even in, like for instance, my room last night at one of the nicest hotels in New York City it's not dark inside. I was sleeping in the light. We need to try to sleep in the dark.
Bob, how do you reverse this process? I mean, if it's a problem with lighting design and obviously urban sprawl, which continues, I mean, it doesn't seem particularly hopeful here.
Well, I have hope. We have a once in a century opportunity right now to rethink how we do outdoor lighting. In the next decade, we're going to relight the entire world with something called LED lighting.
Right.
It's starting up everywhere. New York City has announced that they're going to replace 250 million streetlights, or 250,000 streetlights in the city. This is the time to stop and rethink how we do lighting. We could reverse this trend in a decade if we do it right, but it requires government and city officials to think seriously about the wasted energy that we are spending. We could power 8 million homes with the amount of energy being wasted every year.
I thought it was fascinating to hear you say we have no sense of our place in the universe anymore.
We've lost all connection to the natural world, and the fact that, how do you expect kids to be inspired to reach for the stars when they can't see them anymore?
That's a really good
It's
point.
frustrating.
Interesting topic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
Okay, folks, that wraps up our chapter notes for Chapter 12, Air Pollution, Light Pollution, Noise Pollution. If you have any questions, please bring them to class with you the next time I see you, and I bid you a wonderful day.